The satellite you're looking at has been dead for years. No fuel, no signal, no mission. And yet, last month, the rights associated with it were valued at over $12 million in cash. The buyer didn't want the craft. He wanted the empty space it's sitting in. A parking spot 22,000 miles above your head that you can't see. But that rules your internet, your GPS, and maybe your next war. Welcome back to Serial Crime. Tonight we're hunting for the world's most expensive nothing. 99% of us will never visit the geostationary belt, a thin ring of gravity where satellites appear to hang motionless above Earth. It is a distinct orbital regime, located exactly 35,786 kilometers above the equator, where velocity matches the Earth's rotation. But that ring is beachfront property, and the rent is going up faster than Manhattan studios. A single tenth of a degree of longitude, roughly the width of your thumb held at arm's length, can sell for millions. There are only about 1,800 such slices circling the planet. Once you own one, you can blast a TV show, a football game, or a military command to half of humanity. But what happens when the satellite dies and the slot stays? Turns out the license doesn't die with the bird. It becomes a ghost asset, traded in spreadsheets and Cayman mail drops, while the rest of us stare at buffering wheels. To understand the heist, you have to understand the highway. A geostationary satellite is born with a calculator and a countdown. It rides a pillar of fire to that precise altitude above the equator, then tips over and fires again until its orbital period matches Earth's rotation exactly. 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4 seconds. For 15, sometimes 20 years, it sips solar power and sips fuel, keeping its dish pointed at Kansas, or Kerala, or the Korean Peninsula. But this isn't a passive parking spot. The gravity of the moon and sun, and the fact that Earth isn't a perfect sphere, constantly pull the satellite off course. It requires active station keeping. Without it, a satellite will drift into a gravitational valley. Stable points at 75 degrees east or 105 degrees west, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. But the real limit isn't just physical space, it's interference. If two satellites park too close, closer than 2 degrees apart, their signals overlap, turning your HD stream into static. This 2-degree spacing creates a hard cap on the number of slots available. It is a natural monopoly enforced by the laws of physics. And one day the fuel tank hits red. Engineers run the numbers, shrug, and sign the death certificate. The last order is a final burn. Not to stay, but to leave. It climbs another 300 kilometers to the graveyard orbit, a cosmic trailer park of dead machines drifting in the dark. Most people assume that's the end, but legally, the satellite is still on the books. You see, the slot, that precious slice of sky, is licensed separately from the hardware, and the license can outlive the bird by years, as long as you promise, cross your heart, to replace it. Meet FCC Rule 25.155, a single paragraph that created a ghost marketplace. It interacts with the automatic termination rule, which says a license dies if a station is not operational for 90 days. Sounds strict, right? Use it or lose it. But there's a back door. Operators can file a notification of replacement. As long as they tell the FCC a new satellite is under procurement, they can pause that 90-day death clock. Here's the playbook used by savvy operators. Step 1. Let the satellite die. Step 2. Pay a law firm to file a letter claiming a replacement is coming. Step 3. Stall. Cite launch slips due to supply chain, anomalies during testing, or acts of God. Step 4. Quietly auction the still valid license to the highest bidder, who acquires the replacement expectancy, the right to skip the line and take the slot. Since 2018, we've seen this play out repeatedly. Dead satellites hover in legal limbo, their slots hoarded by holding companies. This replacement expectancy turns a public permission slip into a perpetual property right. Let's talk numbers. In our intro, we mentioned a $12 million sale. That's actually conservative. The real market value for these slots can be staggering. Take the case of Protostar. When Protostar went bankrupt, they weren't just selling used hardware. Their Protostar 1 satellite sold to Intelsat for $210 million. Protostar 2 went to SES for $185 million. The buyers weren't paying that much for the metal. They were paying for the orbital real estate at 98.5 degrees east and 107.7 degrees east. When Intelsat filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2020, they valued their enterprise at $11 billion. A massive chunk of that wasn't hardware. It was orbital slot license rights, valued on their balance sheet as indefinite-lived intangible assets. They don't depreciate like a machine. They hold value forever, as long as the paperwork is filed. And it gets bigger. During the C-band clearing, satellite operators like Intelsat received nearly $5 billion in accelerated relocation payments. They were paid billions, essentially, to get out of the way, to stop squatting on spectrum that mobile carriers needed for 5G. We've even seen sovereign nations get in on the game. Decades ago, the Kingdom of Tonga claimed 16 orbital slots, covering the entire Pacific. They didn't have a space program. They had a paper company called Tongasat, which leased those slots to foreign operators for $2 million a year per slot. Today, companies use similar tactics, registering in places like the Isle of Man to manage filings and bypass stricter domestic regulations. It's a shell game where the asset is invisible, but the wire transfers are very real. When a slot is hoarded, the cost ripples downward. It's not just billionaires trading assets, it's unconnected communities paying the price. Take Astranis, a U.S. startup building small, fridge-sized satellites to bring cheap internet to rural places like Alaska and Peru. They have the tech, they have the funding, but finding a place to park is a nightmare. Regulatory filings show Astranis has had to rely on special temporary authority just to operate because the prime slots are occupied by incumbents or locked up in zombie licenses. While hedge funds book returns on assets that exist only in a database, a startup planning crop monitoring for farmers can't secure spectrum coordination. In one famous case, a startup called Swarm Technologies got so fed up with regulatory gridlock, they launched 4 satellites without FCC permission. They were fined $900,000, but it showed the desperation of new players trying to break into a gated community. Then there's the spectrum war. Ligado Networks spent years in bankruptcy and litigation, fighting incumbents like Viasat over the rights to use L-band spectrum for 5G. Billions of dollars and years of time were incinerated in courtrooms rather than building cell towers. But wait, there's a second price, and this one is physical. Every year, a dead satellite drifts, its orbit wobbles. If an operator delays the graveyard maneuver to squeeze a few more months of revenue out of a dying bird, they risk losing control. Once a satellite becomes a zombie, it drifts along the equator, sweeping through the assigned boxes of active satellites. It becomes a wandering mine, and the collision math is terrifying. While objects in GEO usually move at similar speeds, a collision with debris from a transfer orbit can happen at high velocity. One derelict at 105 degrees west could shatter into 3,000 shards. In GEO, that debris doesn't fall back to Earth. It stays there forever. Insurance companies call it the sky is falling scenario. It's the Kessler syndrome in the world's most valuable orbit. a chain reaction that could wipe out weather forecasting, banking relays, and global TV for generations. And guess who foots the cleanup bill? Not the hedge fund. It dissolved 6 months earlier. So where are the cops? I asked the FCC why the loopholes exist. They sent a statement about balancing rapid deployment with responsible stewardship. Translation: we're watching the carousel spin, hoping it doesn't fly off the axle. But there is movement. Right now, under Docket 23-120 and the new Space Innovation Agenda, the FCC is actually reviewing these rules. Buried in the filings is a proposal to eliminate the bond requirement for smaller players, but tighten the brought into use definitions to stop paper satellites. Globally, the ITU is cracking down too. At the World Radio Communication Conference in 2023, they passed Resolution 8. It forces mega constellations to deploy 10% of their satellites within 2 years or lose their license. No more squatting on paper. You have to build, or you have to leave. Naturally, the incumbents are fighting back. Filings from major operators argue that strict milestones chill investment and that they need flexibility to manage their fleets. They call it prudent planning. Critics call it warehousing. Imagine it's 2035. Half the world still lacks affordable broadband, but the geostationary belt is a gated community. Hedge funds trade orbital slots like crypto tokens. Prices double every 18 months until only 3 global carriers can afford to operate. A solar storm knocks out 2 live satellites. The hoarded spares sit dark, too valuable to risk turning on. Entire regions go offline. Stock markets freeze. Conspiracy? Only if you ignore the paper trail we already have. The next time you scroll TikTok under a starless sky, remember those stars have been replaced by machines, some breathing, some ghosts. Every swipe, every stream hitches a ride on a license that may outlive the metal it was granted to. We can keep treating orbit like an endless frontier, or we can admit it's a commons. Finite, fragile, and already fenced by spreadsheets. The auction gavel echoed in a silent zoom, but the echo belongs to all of us. Tell the FCC the 30-day mirage is over. Tell Congress orbital slots are not baseball cards for billionaires. And the next time someone says space is infinite, send them the coordinates of 105 degrees west, where a dead satellite waits for a replacement that may never come, while the rest of us wait for a signal that may never reach our screens. This is serial crime. We'll see you in orbit, or in the comments.